Hey, hello, and welcome to Prime Code Media. In this video, I'll be discussing the Bootstrap navigation bar. When you create a navigation bar, it's important to ensure that it is responsive, meaning that it should be able to adapt to different viewport sizes. Now, what does a responsive navigation bar look like? Let's take a look at apple.com. This is how apple.com's navigation bar looks like on a large viewport. This is the size of your desktop or laptop. Now let's see how it looks on smaller viewports. You'll see that on smaller viewports, those nav links that appear next to each other on the navigation bar, these ones, they disappear when we get to around this point here. And to access them, we have to come to this toggle here, and then when we click on it, we get a nav. That is a drop down menu with all those nav links. Another one that I'll also like us to check out is sap.com. Here's how the navigation bar looks like on a large viewport. Let's see how it looks on smaller screens. So on smaller screens, again, we get a toggler here. We will see that when I click here, we get a menu with all those nav links that were sitting across or horizontally on the navigation bar. Now, you might have already noticed some differences between the two navigation bars. For example, this one has a toggler on the right, while apple.com has its own on the left. And as you can see, even the drop down menus of these two navigation bars are styled differently. Now, while these navigation bars are styled differently, what is common between them is that they are responsive, which means that they are able to adapt to different screen sizes, which is very important. And now, using Bootstrap, we can also create responsive navigation bars. Let's do this. Inside CodePly, the first thing that I am going to do, I am going to add a nav element. Let me add a nav element like so. So here is my nav element. At the moment, this nav element is empty. So you'll see that even if I run this code, nothing appears here. So this nav element is empty. That's why it is not visible, because just like a div, the nav element gets its dimensions from the contents that it carries. So if it's empty inside, it has absolutely no dimensions, which is the reason why it is not visible here. So what I'm going to add inside this nav element is an unordered list, starting with a UL tag like so. I'm also going to add an LI tag for my list items, and then inside this LI tag, I am going to write about. So this is my first list item. Now let me run this code and see what we get. Now what we get is a list item. As you can see, this word about is bulleted, and this is because by default it is bulleted by default, because this is an unordered list item. But now we don't want to create your usual unordered list items. What we want to create is a navigation bar. So this is supposed to be a nav item, but at the moment the browser is not aware or does not know that. That is why it is rendering this word as it does here. So to make it aware, we are going to use bootstrap classes. Now I'm going to add my first bootstrap class inside the nav element. The first class will be that of navbar, and then inside the UL tag here, I am also going to add a class, and the class here will be that of navbar nav, and then inside the li, I'm going to also add a class, and the class here will be that of nav item. Now let me run this code and see how it's rendered. Now, as you can see, this word is now rendered differently. It is styled differently, and this is because now the browser is able to correctly interpret and render this word as a nav item, and this is made possible by the use of these bootstrap classes that we have used here. So if you are wondering where I'm getting these bootstrap classes, I got them from the documentation at getbootstrap.com. So here are the classes that I have just added. For example, the navbar class that I added inside my nav element here, and you will also see that navbar dash nav class, as well as that nav item class that I added to my list item. So this is where you are going to get everything that you need to know when it comes to this front end framework. So it's very important that when you use this framework, you keep checking the documentation for instructions and guidelines on how you need to use this framework. Now let's also check the source code, behind these classes that we are talking about here. To do that, let's just open it inside our code editor. I'm going to search for the navbar, so that we see the code behind these classes. Now here is the navbar. So it has been styled already for us, so we don't have to go through all the trouble of styling the navigation bar, because Bootstrap has already done that for us. So all we need to do is just to specify the class, and then Bootstrap does all the behind the scenes work for us. So this is just an example of the some of the classes that we will be using, and that will be the case for all the classes that we will be discussing in this tutorial, and all those other ones in the upcoming episodes that we will also be discussing. Now back to CodePly. Now, since this text is a nav item, we want to be able to click on it. So as you can see, at the moment we are unable to do that. So to be able to do that, we'll have to put this text inside an anchor tag. So I'm going to come in here and put this text inside an anchor tag. So I'm going to add an anchor tag here, like so, and this anchor tag is going to have a class. It's going to have a class of nav link. Okay, it's supposed to be a dash here. Yes, it has a class of a nav link as well as an href. I'm going to give it an href of an empty string, and then I'm going to cut this text and paste it right inside the anchor tag. Now let's run this code and see what we get. Now as you can see right now, the word about is styled differently, and when I hover over it, it becomes clickable, as you can see there, that mouse pointer. So we have managed to make this word clickable by putting it inside an anchor tag and giving it a class of a nav link. Now what I'm also going to do, I'm going to copy this item and paste it 3 times so that we have 4 list items. I'm going to change these words here. I'm just going to say products, so that we have 4 nav link items. and then I'll just say here services, and then here will be contact. Okay, contact. Now let's run this code and see if everything is rendered correctly. Now we have 4 list items or link items about products, services, and contact. At the moment, our link items are stacked vertically. To make them sit horizontally next to each other, we'll have to add a class called navbar expand. So we want them to sit next to each other like these ones, horizontally next to each other like these ones. And to do that, we'll have to add a class called navbar expand. But before we do that, let's find out some more about this class navbar expand. So inside our documentation, under the section how it works, you'll see here is that navbar expand. What we have is also an option to specify at which point we want our navbar to expand. For example, we can decide that we want it to expand on small screens or on small viewports, or medium, large, extra large, and so on. So this is the class that we are going to add, and here we are going to specify at which point we want it to expand. So let's go back to CodeBly and put this into practice and see if it works. So inside here, I am going to add the class navbar expand, and then I'm also going to add LG because we want to it to expand on large viewports. Now let's refresh or run the code and see what we get. Now you'll see that on large viewports, the nav links will expand. Right now our navbar is not visible, and this is because our navigation bar is white and it is sitting on a white background. So let's style this so that it is visible. But before we do that, let's go to our documentation and consult so that we get proper instructions in terms of what exactly it is that we need to do. I'm going to come here to color schemes. Under color schemes, you will see that we have options if we want to style our navigation bars. For example, if this is the styling that we want to apply to our nav bar, here is the code that we'll have to make use of. And if we choose this one, that is PG primary, this is the blue one, we'll have to use this code here. And let's just use this one and see how it works. So we are going to just copy these two classes, navbar tag and PG tag. PG tag is for for background. So I'm just going to copy this code and then go back to CodeBly. And then inside here, I'm going to paste everything. Now let's run this code and see if we are able to style it. Now there we go. Now by just pasting in these two classes, we have managed to style our navigation bar, and it is only now that we have styled it or given it a background color that it is visible. So the great thing about Bootstrap is that we have the option, if these styles that Bootstrap is giving us, let's say if we don't want to use these styles, we have the option of using our own style. And to do that, we will have to add or inject CSS into our element. We have been given an example here. So what we will do, we will have to insert a style attribute and then specify a CSS property as well as its value. This will be the choice in the case of our color, that is the color that we prefer to use if we do not want to use these preferred or pre-styled styles that are offered by Bootstrap. Now let's change the styling of our navigation bar to something that we prefer. So I'm going to come inside here, and then the only thing that I am going to change or delete is this BG dark. So I'm going to delete this BG dark, and then I am going to add a style attribute. Then inside the style attribute, I'm going to specify the CSS property. This is background color. Then I'm also going to let me use color hunt. I'm going to use color hunt to pick up a color of my choice for my navigation bar. So say this is my choice, so this is the color that I want to use. So let me pick this up, and then I'm going to go back to code ply and then paste the hex code. So it's important for this hex code to work to ensure that it is preceded by a hashtag sign like so. So now let's run this code and see what we get. Now, as you can see, I have now managed to style this navigation bar differently. So I have managed to not only stick to the colors or the styling that Bootstrap offers us here, I have managed to use a color of my choice, and that by adding a style attribute specifying the CSS property as well as the value, which in this case is my preferred color, which is this dark bluish or navy blue. Next, we need to add a nav brand. Now, as you can see, for example, here on SAP, they have managed to add their own brand to the left here. So we can also add our own brand to our navigation bar here. But to do that, let's first see what the documentation says we should do in order to successfully achieve that. I'm going to look for brand right here. Here is brand. So what I am going to do, as you can see here, it says the navbar brand can be applied to most elements, but an anchor works best, as some elements might require utility classes or custom styles. So because it says here anchor tags work best, this is what we are going to do as advised by this documentation, and we are going to do this inside code ply just above the UL tag. I'm going to create space here. So this is where I'm going to add my brand. So what I'm going to do here, as advised by the documentation, I'm going to add an anchor tag, and this anchor tag is going to have a class. It's going to have a class of navbar brand, and it's also going to have an age ref of an empty string, and then I am going to write the name of my brand here. Let me name my brand. I'll just name it my biz or my brand. Okay, you can name yours whatever it is that you prefer. I'll just name this my brand. Let's just run this code and see what we get. Now this is how my brand looks like. So we have successfully managed to add the brand into our navigation bar, and we did that by first adding a an anchor tag, and then give it give it a class of navbar brand as well as an href of an empty string, and this is the result that we get. Now, if we take a look at sap.com, there's space between this brand and these link items. Okay, so the space between here, how did this space how did they add this space? So if we also want to add this space or to achieve this, we need to add a margin to the start of this list. So we'll have to come in here and add a margin at the start of the links. So let's first consult the documentation and see what advice we get. So inside documentation, if you can just scroll down to utilities and click open spacing. So inside spacing, if you look under margin and padding, you'll see that if we want to add a margin at the start of these links, what we need to use is this M. This is M for margin, and then we are going to add this margin where at the start. Okay, so it's going to be a margin start. So it's going to be the margin at the left of this list. So it's going to set a margin to the left of our list, that is right at this point here. Now, what else do we have here? We also want to set this margin to auto. So this is because auto is going to add as much space as is needed. So let's go ahead and do this. So inside the UL element, I am going to add the margin. I'm going to say M for margin, S for start, and then I'm going to set this to auto, because as I said earlier, this will add as much margin as is necessary between the brand and the links. So let's run this code and see what we get. Now there we go, we have managed to add margin between these two items, the brand and the links. So as you can see now, the links are there on the right and the brand is on the left. So we've managed to add this margin by adding a class inside the UL element. We have added a margin start, and then we set it to auto, and this is what we got as an outcome. Now let's see how our navigation bar looks like on smaller screens. Let's see how it looks like on an iPad. So this is how our nav items will be stacked on smaller viewports. That is the size of your iPad. Let's see, that will also be the case on smartphones. Yes, so this is how they will look on a smartphone, but this is not how we want our nav items to be stacked when we are viewing them on smaller viewports. Let's go back to components and go to nav bar and then toggler. Now here's the first example of a navigation bar. Let's see how it looks like on a smaller viewport. Let's see how it looks like on a smaller viewport. You'll see that when we get to around this point, those nav items, they disappear, and then we get this toggler here, and for us to get those nav link items, we'll have to click on it, and then we get this drop down menu. So this is just one of the options that we have. Let's explore further. You'll see that at here we have another one. Here it says with no navbar brand shown on the smallest breakpoint, and another one here. This one, it says with a brand name shown on the left or on the right. Okay, with a brand name shown on the left and the toggler on the right. Yes, so let's just put this one to a test. Okay, so first let's see how it looks. So this is the navigation bar. Let's see how on a smaller screen looks. Let's see. So this is how it looks. Let me scroll up a bit here. So we get this toggler up here. So as it says here, it says with no navbar brand shown on the smallest breakpoint. This is actually the one that we checked out earlier. Let's scroll down. With no navbar shown on the smallest breakpoint, with a brand name shown on the left and a toggler on the right. So this is the one that I was talking about. So when we click here, we get those nav links coming down here. So this is the one that we are going to put to a test. We are going to use this one inside our own navigation bar. So let's see what they did in order to get this one right. The first thing that they did is to add a they've added a bar. They also added a div, and then inside this div, as you can see, there is this ID. So this ID is very important because it ensures that when you click on the hamburger button or the toggler, the correct nav link is being targeted. So let's add this button inside our navigation bar. So I'm going to copy this code and paste it inside code.py here. Let me just create space like so. So I've copied and pasted this button inside code.py. So next I am going to add a div. So I'm going to add a div here like so. And then I am going to cut everything here, these list items, this unordered list, all of it. I'm going to cut it and paste it inside this div. And then remember the ID that I was talking about. So it is very important that we include all these classes. So the collapse navbar collapse class is very important because this is what is going to happen when we click the toggler. And then this ID is also very important that we add it. So I'm going to copy everything inside here, the classes as well as the ID. So I'm going to copy everything and paste it inside my div inside here. So right here. Now let me just double check the ID. So here is that ID. As you can see, I just want to show you where I'm getting this ID inside this button. So you'll see that this ID corresponds to this class here, data ps-target. So you can change it. So if you change the name here, you'll have to make sure that you also change the name here so that they correspond, so that when you click on the toggler understands exactly which item it is targeting. Now we are done with that. Let me run this code and see what we get. So at the moment, as you can see, the nav brand has moved to the left. Why? This is very important. It's very important to be careful where you put your button. So what is going to be rendered first? So if you look at this code here, the first thing that is being rendered is the list, the nav links. And then where exactly is the brand? Let's take a look at the brand. Here it is at the bottom. It is rendered last, and that is why it is appearing right at the corner here. So I'm going to cut this brand from here, and then I am going to put it is going to be the first item inside our code. So I'm going to paste it. Let me paste it right here, and then let's run this code. As you can see, it is right back where it was supposed to be, and this is because when the browser reads this code, it first reads this brand first, and that is why it is rendered here. So it is very important that you check where you put your items in order for them to be rendered correctly. Now let's see how our navigation bar will look like on smaller viewports. Let's start with the size of an iPad. Here's how it will look like on an iPad. So on an iPad, our navigation bar is not going to have those nav links. To access the nav links, we will have to come to this hamburger button. You'll see when I click on it, we get this drop down menu with all those nav links, and that will be the case even when you are viewing this nav bar on a smartphone. And that brings us to the end of our discussion of the Bootstrap navigation bar. Please subscribe to this channel and click the bell icon to be notified when new videos come out. Thanks for watching. Till we code again next time. Take care.